I'm David Hunt and welcome to today's show. My guest today, he's important. He loves to stand in front of large crowds of people and boss them around. Loves it, control freak. So he's a conductor and musical director, a winner of the Australian International Choir Conducting Championships in 1999. Hello, come on down, you're a winner. He is artistic director and chief conductor of the Royal Melbourne Philharmonic Choir, and he also is the principal conductor of Melbourne Uni Choir as well, the society there, and was heading up the beautiful Australian Children's Choir as well. He's won so many awards, it's not funny. He's been recognised by the country, and why wouldn't you? Andrew Wailes, hello.
Hello there, David.
And congratulations on a brilliant career.
Thank you. Thank you.
So where did it all start for you, the music journey?
Well, the music journey, I think, started probably in utero. I mean, I think so many children brought into families that have parents that have a love of music sort of inherit that from day one.
Yep.
I wasn't sort of part of a particularly musical family per se, but Mum had done a little bit of music at school, and Dad had been a very keen amateur singer himself as a young man and throughout most of his life. And I got to an age, I suppose, 6 or so, and we were dragged up to church on Christmas Day, as is the usual deal with families at Christmas. And there was a recruiting drive going on for boys for the choir.
Yep.
And the then choir director was a very good friend of my father's, and my father had been a long time member in the choir, and whether they'd conspired or whether it was just a happy coincidence, the choir master came over and said, how'd you like to come and sit next to me in the organ console today? And so I was about this tall, and I went in. I thought it was the most incredible thing I'd ever seen. This mad guy in a flowing cape, playing with hands and feet going in all directions.
I know.
And I sat there and I was mesmerised. He was pulling out all these stops, and it was like you were driving a Concorde. And I just loved it. I thought this was fantastic. So I actually sort of thought that I was going to become an organist for about 5 minutes. He convinced me to start singing in the church choir.
Right.
I joined, I think, the next week. I'd memorised Elgar's Ave Verum Corpus after 1 week, one rehearsal. And so I was obviously sort of naturally, I had a good ear. And of course I couldn't read music back then, but I learned. That's how I learned. The English tradition of Royal School of Church Music training is that you basically get in and do it.
Yeah.
You learn on the job, and you gradually learn your theory as you go, and you learn your sight reading, and you become really proficient. So that, in my opinion, the best sight readers in the world just about are all English cathedral singers. They just have to be able to go in and read anything on a very minimal rehearsal. And so after a while, I realised that I was becoming quite good at that. And at school, I didn't sing at all. I played flute. I wanted to play the trumpet. That didn't work out. Wanted to play the clarinet. They didn't have one. I got handed the violin. Hated the violin. Another story for another day. But it did involve me throwing my violin out the second-story window when I fainted one day on a very hot day. So that was the end of my violin career. Got rid of that very quickly. And then someone said, well, look, all we've got left's a flute. There's a flute. And sort of put it into my hand. And I went along to the flute class with about 400 other kids, and they were all sitting there trying to blow it and put it together, and I was playing tunes on it. Like literally the first day I just picked it up and I could play it. So that was my instrument, and I did that seriously, and I got better and better at it. I played in the orchestras, and any excuse to be in a band, an orchestra, go on camp, whatever I could do, that was it. And I was still singing but outside of school. And then I joined a youth orchestra, and I did a little tiny bit of really, really, really primitive conducting there. So the conducting all came out of that training as a kid, as a church musician, as a choir boy.
Yeah.
And watching good teachers and watching conductors in various orchestras. And then came to fruition one day, I suppose, when I'd just gone to university. Went to join the orchestra, couldn't join the orchestra because they rehearsed on a night that I was already busy, and I thought, what to do now? Joined the choir,
Ah.
A week later, we had our first performance for the year. It was the annual, the commencement service, I think they called it. And they had the Vice Chancellor and the Governor and the Premier and all the dignitaries were there. And it was a big deal. And, you know, everyone walks in their academic gowns and it's all very grand. Anyway, the choir was set to sing a couple of short pieces as a part of the sort of the ceremony. And it turned out that the conductor had been held up in a car accident. We got a message by phone that he wasn't going to make it. Go on without me, you know, and there was this great consternation, people running around like headless chickens. What are we going to do? And I was 17. I was only just sort of comfortably 17, quite young at university. I went to university a year early, and several of the pieces were very well known to me. I'd been singing them since I was 7 years old, so I knew them really quite well. Yeah. And I said, oh, look, I can start them and stop them. That's not a big drama. And I did. I literally just brought them in. And it wasn't anything special. Yeah. But for the people there, it was. And they said, oh, look, can you be our assistant conductor? And then I panicked. And I thought, I better go and get lessons and do this properly. So I went off and did that. That's a story for another day. But that's how I became a conductor. I had no intention of becoming a conductor. Whoa. And I still didn't expect to become a professional musician. I was doing a law degree, so I was going to be a barrister. Okay. But the music just took over. And one year I was sitting there and I realised when I filled out my tax form when it said, you know, what are you? And I went musician. I went, oops.
So what did your parents...
How did that happen?
What did your parents think?
Oh, they were very impressed for quite a while. In fact, I changed officially and decided to do the whole cold turkey and really go music full time. I accepted a contract to sing with the Australian Opera. Mum and Dad were on holiday in Europe and I didn't tell them because the minor... 18 or something, 19. Okay. The minor twist was that I had to actually withdraw from my last law subject before I graduated to law. I'd done the arts degree, I'd done about 4 different majors, you know, I just kept on finding different arts subjects. And then I decided, I don't want to be a lawyer anymore. I've worked that out and it's just going to be a waste of time and money. And I had a leg in plaster at the time because I'd wrecked my knee playing cricket and I needed a knee operation. Going to Monash University on crutches was a particularly unpleasant experience at the time because none of the lifts worked. And I just thought, I just made the call. I said, that's it, I'm going to go and sing with the Australian Opera. And so I did. And I didn't tell them for several months. And one day the old man, I was still living at home, and one day the old man said to me, he said, oh, you're not going to many lectures at the moment. I said, oh, I've only got a few left. You know, he said, oh, okay. Because that was true. I was still lingering on doing a few extra master's subjects. And he wasn't really any of the wiser until I finally plucked up the courage to tell him sometime later. And of course, all hell broke loose and I was the stupidest person in the world. Until he opened the newspaper one day and there was a large article of me in The Age and a big photograph. Oh. And then there were these calls across the, you know...
Why?
Come on, look at this. There was a big article on... I just happened to be doing something and an overzealous publicist had got excited and they'd done a big article. It was a big sort of new kid on the block type article. Yep. Sort of leaning very aggressively into the doorway of the Melbourne Town Hall in my finery with my surfy peroxide blonde hair and my tails and up against the grandeur of the Melbourne Town Hall. And it was basically, I'd just been appointed the new conductor of the Melbourne Philharmonic. And that was a fairly big deal for someone so young to do it. In 160 years, I think I was, you know, half the age of the next youngest conductor. Wow. So that was the minute he actually realised that what I'd done had meaning. It was significant, and that I'd probably made the right decision, and the rest is history. It just happened.
Voice, you obviously choirs that you're involved in. The one over my shoulder, how many people do you think are in that one?
At the moment, the Royal Melbourne Philharmonic, we've got about 110 odd members. We're building that up again next year. We've obviously been smaller for the last few years because of, you know, that thing that we won't mention. But we had actually intentionally made the choir smaller. I mean, that was my doing. I'd intentionally shrunk the choir to bring up the quality. I felt that, you know, there were a lot of big choirs that were of an average standard in Melbourne, but we needed to have a big choir that was of a high standard, and the only way to do that was to shrink it and then grow it again with a higher standard of entry. So over a period of years we've done that, and now we've got a fantastic, really dynamic group of people. They're younger. About a third of the choir now have tertiary degrees in music. It's a seriously skilled group, which means now we can do far more stuff. You know, last year we were performing in arenas with Bocelli. You know, we can go into recording studios and record with you know, leading artists. I think we had 3 #1 Sony commercial releases in 2 years or something with Olivia Newton-John, John Farnham, Dami Im. We've performed with people like Delta Goodrum and Guy Sebastian and Mark Vincent, and you know these are all sort of names that wouldn't normally be associated with amateur choruses. But we've got to the stage now where we can perform at a much higher professional standard, so we can do that sort of work, which is fun in amongst our series.
Yeah, and that's the wonderful thing, knowing you over the years, is that the fact that, you know, like, it's a, as you said, you're one of the youngest to be a conductor.
Was.
But,
Get a bit old now.
But the fact is that you've created, you know, like, it's not stuffy with you. You're like, you are very open to, and that's the wonderful thing about you, is that you're open to performing with all those pop artists.
Yeah, I think it's really important, actually. I mean, one thing that I get frustrated by is my own art form, and I don't think classical musicians are always the best at being able to read the room. And I think we can get so caught up in our little bubble and so focused on the nuances of, you know, I could go on now for, you know, 5 minutes about, you know, intricacies of Baroque ornamentation. I'm not sure you'd still be here at the end of it. Those things are important, they're part of our art, but they're not necessarily what everyone else wants to hear.
Yeah.
And I think likewise, we've got beautiful voices. Yes, they can sing Handel, they can sing Orff, they can sing Brahms, they can sing Rachmaninoff, you know, they can sing Carl Wein. But there's a time and a place to also sing a bit of pop music, or to sing Ars and Oohs behind Dami Im or Delta Goodrum at the Melbourne Cup. And often, you know, we forget that the audience is made up of people who have all sorts of different tastes.
Yep.
And the reaction of audiences is really quite different depending on where you are and how you perform. I've just come back from Queensland. I've just done a series of Messiah performances in Queensland. Now, it's the same work that I'm very familiar with doing down here, and people see me doing it every year down here. But, you know, up in Queensland, it's not something that gets done very often because they haven't got the resources.
Right.
And so when a professional orchestra and 4 good professional soloists and a well-trained 80-voice choir turn up to a basketball stadium, which is where we performed our first performance, in a brand new 600-person basketball stadium, packed it to the gills. First time there was ever an event held in that venue.
Oh, brilliant.
And it was absolutely packed to the rafters. I got a bigger standing ovation and cheer at the end of that work than I do in the Sydney Opera House or the Melbourne Town Hall.
Wow.
So it just goes to show that people are happy to enjoy that art form, but they don't necessarily want to just enjoy that art form. A few of the ladies that were in the audience after that performance happened to be at the restaurant that we went to for dinner afterwards. And they were completely awestruck because they'd never been in the presence of classical musicians before, and they were really quite nervous. And I said, look, we're just people. We're here eating Vietnamese just like you are. They had never been to a concert like that. They'd never been to a formal classical concert. They'd never seen a concert master come out and bow. They'd never seen a conductor wear tails. They'd never seen an opera singer hold their score up and sing an aria. And they said it was enchanting. They said they had goosebumps, you know. And I said, well, what sort of music do you normally like? And they said, oh, well, you know, I like Jimmy Barnes, you know, and I like Olivia Newton-John, and I love a bit of ABBA, and all of this stuff, which we all like a bit of ABBA. We all like a bit of Freddie Mercury singing Queen. Yeah. There's a place for it all. And I tell you what, you know, you go into every chorus out there, every symphonic chorus or symphony orchestra, and you'll find people that play in rock bands. You'll find people that do covers. You'll find people that write pop. You'll find, or there's always Disney freaks. I mean, you know, there's always a quarter of the soprano section that are all Disney princesses. So, you know, there's a room and a place for all those styles of music. And I actually love being able to occasionally bring genres together. One of the most bizarre gigs I ever did was I worked with Kiss when they did the age, or what it was called, Alive. It was the Alive tour. With and we had the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra, and we had the Australian Children's Choir, and we had, you know, 50,000 screaming Kiss fans, and we were all in the full makeup and the whole bit. You know, I got escorted out into the mosh pit with my own security detail. You know, and it was just another world. It was a completely different world. I mean, when I told people that I was going to be on stage with Kiss, they literally laughed in my face because you couldn't get someone who was less interested in that music at the time. But that went on to be the #1 video around the world. Went right around the world, and was one of the first big collaborations between, well, in that case, a heavy metal band and a symphony orchestra. And of course, that now is the norm. De rigueur. It's just everyone does it. I'll never forget watching as a boy the fantastic collaboration between Elton John and the MSO when he first teamed up with them back in probably the 90s. And I just thought that was the most amazing collaboration, because he had one of my favourite, well, he was my favourite pop singer at the time, playing classical piano with a symphony orchestra, with all of his backing band and drum kits and everything else, and all the things that go with the big stadium tour concerts, like the smoke machines and the flashy lights. And it was just a perfect combination.
Yeah.
So I have no problem doing crossover stuff as long as it's done well.
Yep.
I think classical musicians are experts at doing classical concerts. They need the producers of the rock bands to do those types of events.
Yep.
But likewise, the producers of the rock concerts, when they need good musicians on stage, should call in professionals to do that, and have proper music directors that can collaborate.
Yeah.
And then it all goes very smoothly.
Yeah. With those big choruses on stage with you, you're like standing there. When I've been to concerts, I'm getting goosebumps now, just the thought of it. The washing over me. What's it like for you, Andrew, just stand there?
It's no different to what the audience feels. I mean, there are moments when you really do just lose your place in the world, and just for that moment, that scintilla of time, that really quick moment, you just forget where you are, and you're sort of just doing it. I suppose when you're a conductor, you're thinking about so many things,
of course,
that you're not relaxing very much, and so it's not just pure enjoyment. You are actually thinking, how fast, when do I cut off, who's watching me, where do I need to give the cue next, when do the brass come in, all these things. And you have to do everything a beat before it happens. So a conductor's gestures always happen a moment before anyone hears the result. And so it's quite a complicated series of gestures, and then sometimes just raw emotion, you know. I mean, there are some pieces of music that just get me every time. The final climactic moment in Mahler 2 is one of those moments where conductors are just famous for just sort of closing their eyes and doing the Leonard Bernstein crucifixion pose, you know. And they really are just so magnificent at that moment. Works like the Verdi Requiem that are just so iconic can have everything from hushed utterances of, maybe 200 voices singing very softly to suddenly the boom of that bass drum in the Dies Irae, where it just blows everyone off the stage. So it's part semaphore. We're giving directions. It's like air traffic control. I often compare conducting to air traffic control. Our job is to get people off safely and land safely. And whilst they're cruising in between, they do most of the work themselves, and we just sort of, follow them along. But it's the key moments where all the danger is, takeoffs and landings, that conductors really come into their own. Because if you've got 150, 200, maybe 300 performers on stage, it's not possible for 300 people to all feel a beat exactly the same way without some help.
Yep.
So we provide the conduit. We give the cue, and everyone can then use that as their reference point, and it works. It's a pretty sophisticated invention. Really.
I could imagine. The timing that and the trust they have to obviously have in you was really important with all the rehearsals. Favourite pieces, because the good thing is, like you say that in pop music or whatever, and there's people still alive with classical music. Is there favourite pieces of yours?
Absolutely. I mean, I think every musician has favourite pieces. My problem is as I get older and as I conduct more and as I hear more and I travel more and hear other great orchestras and watch other conductors around the world, I collect more and more favourites.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard now to say, what is your favourite piece of music?
Yeah.
Everyone presumes it's Handel's Messiah because I do it so often and I know it so well that that's presumed to be my favourite piece of music. It's a fantastic piece of music. I feel very honoured to be able to conduct it every year. But I don't think it would be my favourite piece of music. Okay. Because I can think of other Handel pieces that I probably love more.
Yeah.
I love Elgar. I adore Elgar's music. I love all the Russians. Rachmaninoff, Tchaikovsky, Prokofiev, even some of the more contemporary Russian composers, Grachaninov, and some of the older Russian composers like Bortniansky. There's a whole genre there of music that you really rarely hear in Australia, which I adore. I love English church music. That was my background, I suppose. That's where I started. So a very simple little piece of English church music that may be 500 years old can bring tears to my eyes just as much as a great Mozart symphony can.
And talking about that, you know, like as a lead up to Christmas, you're doing a couple of they're spectacular.
We do we do 3 big carols in the cathedral concerts in St Paul's Cathedral every year. This year they're on the, I better get it right, I think it's Friday the 15th and Saturday the 16th of December. We do a late night show on the Friday, we do an afternoon matinee on the Saturday, and then we do a sort of a 7 o'clock show on the Saturday night. And they sell out every year. I mean, without fail, people just flock to those concerts, and we have a cast of literally hundreds. We have, you know, 50 members of the National Boys Choir. We have the Royal Melbourne Philharmonic, the Melbourne University Choir, the Box Hill Chorale. Sometimes we'll have another guest choir. We've got the City of Melbourne Highland Pipes and drums. They march in. We have fanfare trumpets and string quartets and Roland Roccacelli reading.
Excuse me.
It just goes on and on and on. It's bigger than Ben-Hur.
Excuse me. That's so you, isn't it?
It's very me.
You love that big event, don't you?
I love big events, but I also love Christmas done well. I've always said Christmas to me, there's 2 types of Christmas of anything, whether it's food, whether it's decorations, whether it's music. It's either good or it's bad. So
what is the one thing, Andrew, with what you were telling us just then about these Christmas performances, so extravagant, is there something else out there like that you would like to do for a special occasion?
I've wanted to do a symphonic concert of ABBA's best hits for 20 years.
Right.
And when the latest album broke during COVID and they got back together, I don't know about you, but I was quite emotional. You know, I'm a bit of a sort of a secret ABBA fan out there. It's not necessarily fashionable to be an ABBA fan these days, but it is
as well. Yeah.
You know, it's funny how that. I've always said to people, you'll get people that say, "Oh, I don't listen to ABBA." But you put on an ABBA song, and that's the song that everyone gets up to dance to.
Yeah.
Still, whether they're in their teens, or their 20s, or their 30s, or their 70s, or their 80s.
Yeah.
ABBA will get them up, and they'll get dancing. And what I've always loved about ABBA is the beautiful harmony and the exquisite production of their songs, and that immaculate blend of those 2 women's voices. It was just that's what made ABBA. And I've always thought that, you know, if I could go back in time and have the resources that I have now, I'd do a whole concert of ABBA's greatest hits with ABBA out the front, backed by 100 singers in, you know, lush 8-part harmony, and a symphony orchestra, and, you know, the little guy out the front on his little honky-tonk piano. I just think that would be brilliant.
Yep.
And I love that crossover sort of mix of good quality arrangements of popular music. There's nothing wrong with doing popular music. We forget that in his day, Handel, who composed Messiah, he was the man of the theatre. He was the Andrew Lloyd Webber of London in the mid-1700s. And so we all get a little bit precious these days that classical music has to be just classical and can't be popular. And I think that's ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely.
Opera is loved by people because it is a form of popular music.
Yeah.
You sing Nessun Dorma in a football stadium and 50,000 people will be ecstatic. You sing Nessun Dorma at La Scala in Milan and maybe a couple of thousand people will be just as ecstatic in a different situation. The same piece of music has the same effect on people. And so I think there's no reason why classical musicians can't join good popular musicians and then bring the art form to another level. I think that's, last year I had the great privilege of touring with Andrea Bocelli and his family, so Matteos and Victoria, the whole family, and listening to those crowds just react to a little girl singing a really simple song but backed by a huge symphony orchestra and 100 singers. Or Bocelli singing a great operatic aria that most of the audience have probably never heard in the context of an opera before, but loving it and going home whistling, you know, Bellini or Puccini on the way home. That just to me says that music is music, and music is a very powerful thing. It gets into our soul. So why not mix it up a bit?
Well, come on, you don't have to have them out front. It would be nice.
They're getting a bit old now. They're doing avatars now.
Yes.
We don't quite have the technology here in Melbourne. But no, look, one day that's a little... and the other thing that I've always wanted to do is a really lush version of, a symphonic version of Les Miserables. because I adore that score. And I saw that once at Royal Albert Hall in London, and they had a massive symphony orchestra and a huge chorus, and all the soloists lined up out the front. And they just did it simply in concert, sort of vaguely in costume. And I remember being so proud that about 4 of the principal artists in that performance were from Australia. You know, Philip Quast and Anthony Warlow, people like this. And I just thought, you know, what a fantastic piece of music.
I'm going to stop you there, because do you know Josh Pitterman?
Yes.
He sat on that couch, and he's just finished doing Les Mis in London. He's a local boy.
Yeah. Oh, we've got you know, in the world of music theatre, we have some of the best in the world, and not just singers, but choreographers, directors, dancers, you know, videographers. I mean, look what Baz Luhrmann's done in his little part of the world. There's a lot of Australian talent out there, and if you go to Broadway, people like Hugh Jackman are absolutely, you know, they are the doyen of society. And so I think we forget that Australia is really good at a lot of things, and sport is definitely one of them. And I love sport like most Australians do. We all have a footy team, we all watch the cricket when we're winning. And we're good at it. But, you know, we're good at the arts too.
But that's why people like you, and with your passion and putting on a real show for a lot of people like you're doing with these Christmas ones, why aren't you doing more events like Les Mis?
It's money. It's the simple problem that this art form, unfortunately, is a very expensive one, and venues that are a premium. I think we've got so many things happening in places like Melbourne. I mean, we forget how big a city Melbourne is. I keep having to put it into context when people tell me that we're only a small population, and I just say balderdash. I've just come back from Europe, where most of the great capitals of Europe are 1 million or less, and we're 3-4 million. We're a mega city, and we don't think like a mega city still. We should. But the truth is, we actually have a lot going on, and even though we have wonderful facilities in Melbourne, they're all packed to the seams. You know, they're all struggling to cope. And there isn't a lot of extra money in the arts budget these days. And so those big things that really do cost money, with the advent now of, you know, insurance and occupational health and all the necessary things that go with putting on those enormous shows, the logistic costs are enormous. And sadly, most middle or smaller arts organisations just don't have the
Does that frustrate you, though?
It does frustrate me. What frustrates me the most is that we don't celebrate our great artists anywhere near as much as we celebrate our average sportsman. We have great sportsmen in this country that are truly world champions or national champions, and they're deserving of reverence. But, you know, I look at a sort of an average B-grade sports person and the fuss that is made of them, and I think, well, what about doing the same with an average B-grade musician or dancer or actor or film writer? I mean, there's so many great artists in Australia that have had celebrated careers all around the world. You only need to look at the world of opera, and, you know, the name Joan Sutherland is in the top 3 or 4 of anyone in the world. And they say great voices of the century. Where's the statue to Joan Sutherland in Australia? You know, one of the world's great guitar players is John Williams. Where's the statue to John Williams? Or Barry Tuckwell, the great horn player. Some of these people are regarded as the best in the world by the world, and yet in Australia they're still relatively unknown outside a little bubble. And I think that's what I'd like to see in Australia, a bit more celebration of a more diverse range of things that we're good at. We're great at science, we're great at medicine, we're great at sport, we're great at architecture, we're also great at music, and we forget that. People are surprised when they go to London and they see the Australian Chamber Orchestra sold out, or they go to visit the Royal Opera House in Covent Garden and then realise that a third of the chorus there are Australians. We've got singers, we've got players all over the world, leading orchestras, conducting, singing, performing, dancing, but when they come home they're semi-anonymous. And I think that's sad. I think we could do better.
Yeah, I agree. So get off that soapbox and do something about it.
I'm trying.
Andrew, thank you so much for chatting with me today. It's been an absolute pleasure. We could be chatting for another hour or so.
Hours and hours. Yeah. There's just not enough drinks to go around.
Exactly. Thank you so much.
Pleasure, David. Thank you.
I'm David Hunt. You've been watching this amazing man here next to me, and we'll be back again next week. See you, folks.